So my name is Shannon Kenitz, and I'm the founder of this clinic here. And after the talk, we are going to give tours if you haven't been in the clinic before. The clinic is a full-service integrative center. We offer things such as hyperbaric therapy, we have chelation therapy, we have nutritional therapy, PT, OT, speech. The reason why the clinic was formed was because I have a daughter with special needs who spent the first 3 years of her life in the hospital, basically on life support. And all of my mainstream physicians were telling me to let my daughter go. And there was nothing more that they could do for Grace. But as a mom, it was something that I just didn't feel that I could do, and that I needed to seek other things. That for me was hyperbaric therapy. I had to take her out of the hospital on a Wednesday because the state of Wisconsin had won the rights to turn her life support off. And took her out of the hospital on a Wednesday, went to Florida, started hyperbaric therapy, and my daughter started to come alive. At age 3, she only weighed 15 pounds, but had a feeding tube, was blind, had seizures, was unable to sit up, walk, talk, but more importantly, as a parent, my daughter had absolutely no idea that I was her mom or that she was loved. And after hyperbaric therapy, my daughter started to move her fingers and to lift her head up. And to date, my daughter is now 12 years old. Her feeding tube is gone. She no longer has seizures. She walks, she talks, and the greatest gift that I had from hyperbarics is that my daughter knows that I'm her mom. And she calls me mommy, and she knows what that means. So it really empowered me to make change and to advocate for alternative health. Because we really need to remember in this country that physicians are practicing medicine. Not any one physician knows the answer for us as adults or for our children or any loved one that has any type of medical condition. And so the greatest thing that you could take out of everything that you do in your life is hope, and to know that there are things out there that are helping people and that you don't have to listen to the negativity that may be surrounding you. And there are incredible physicians like Dr. Morrison and Dr. Tran who see past just pharmaceuticals and who see past that if we empower ourselves to make change in a healthy way in a variety of nutrition and change in your health style and so forth, that it really can make a difference on your overall health. So I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Tran. Dr. Tran is one of our physicians here at the clinic. So she's going to introduce Dr. Morrison, but if you have not taken a tour of the clinic afterwards, we'll be doing them. And we are really pleased. I'm pleased to have Dr. Tran working at our clinic. She's a phenomenal physician, and even more privileged that you came all the way from New York to California to give this talk. So take it away.
Thank you, Shannon. It's a great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Morrison. He's a medical doctor from New York City and worked first with an acting center and opened up his private practice on 5th Avenue in 2004. And as part of my environmental medicine training program, I had the opportunity to go to New York and study with Dr. Morrison and was able to witness all the great programs that he was implementing for his patients. And I am thrilled that he's here today to share some of the work that he's done in his practice. And he spent the last year compiling all his work into this book, Cleanse Your Body, Clear Your Mind, which we will have here for purchase after the lecture for $45. And without further ado, I'm going to let you start.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jessica, Shannon, thank you for inviting me down, and also thank you all for coming. I really appreciate and certainly understand how difficult it is to get out of your house at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning and come down for a talk on health and nutrition. But I really appreciate it, and I hope that you'll go away from today with some new information about health and how you can live in our today's environment in as healthy a way as possible. So as Jessica was saying, I'm from New York City. I had a great flight out here on Virgin America. They really know how to treat their customers. I do not work for them. And since I've been here, everybody's been so nice. I must say, coming from New York, you know, everybody's understands the reputation of New Yorkers, and we're so fast-paced, and everyone's very nice. But here it's different. Like, can I open the door? What can I do for you? That's what I see about California. So today we're going to be having a talk about health and nutrition, and I'm going to go over a couple of things that may be review for some of you people. We're going to be talking about a refresher in biology, so it's going to take you back to maybe high school. And we're going to talk about environmental medicine, which is the type of practice that, one of the things that is practiced at this center, and it's also the same type of practice I have in New York City. We're going to talk about how there's toxins in our environment that are making us sick, and how to identify them and what we can do to live a healthier life by making better choices. And then I'm going to talk to you about a study that I completed in my office that's going to be published by the end of the year about when we put people on a detox diet, how they felt so much better and also lost weight. So, talking about biology. So remember, back in the day in high school, we learned about different organ systems and how the body is supposed to work. And the reason it's important to know how the body works is because it's important to know what happens when the body's not working as well as it's supposed to. So we're going to start off talking about the skin, which everybody knows is the largest organ in the body. And what I take away from knowing the skin is the largest organ is that when a person comes to my practice, the first thing that I do is I look at their skin, I look at their face, I look at their hands and nails, and it gives me a really good idea about how healthy they are as individuals. If a person has a pink color, pink complexion, that's a great sign. If a person has acne or a white complexion or is, tends to get a lot of clogged pores, those are all signs that that organ is not detoxifying itself as well as it should, or something is going on inside of the body. The respiratory system is another important organ system for detoxification. And what the lungs do is they bring in oxygen, which is used for energy, and I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. And it also is a way to get rid of carbon dioxide, which is a waste product of cellular metabolism. That's how our body makes energy. Oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide goes out. We don't think about it on a day-to-day basis, but that's how our body functions. Now the other thing that the lungs do, they also, through the nose and respiratory tract, air particles are filtered to take out pollen and dust and chemicals, and it's a way to protect chemicals from getting inside of our body. We see a lot of people that are post-9/11 workers that have come to our office to get detoxified because they've had terrible lung problems that have been unremitting for 10 years because they inhaled a lot of fine particles that were, sort of set into the air after the World Trade Center buildings went down. And they still are suffering from that today because once the lungs become damaged, they don't heal themselves, okay? Now, whenever anybody's ever talked about detoxification, they always are talking about the kidneys. Has anybody here ever seen an acupuncturist? Or has anybody tried a detox program? Well, the kidneys is the organ in the body that filters fluid. And what's amazing is that it filters about 2 liters of water a day. That's a lot of fluids. Think about how much water you're drinking every day. It's probably about 1 to 2 liters. So whatever water you put in your body, it has to come out, and that's through the kidneys. The other things that the kidneys do is they filter out a lot of chemicals, like prescription medications. So all of those prescription medications that we're taking for certain health conditions have to be filtered by the kidneys, and the liver as well, but the kidneys for the most part. So we want to have healthy kidneys, and that's why it's important to drink lots of fluids so that they're well filtered. The liver is the other really important organ for detoxification. And the liver is the largest organ inside of the body. It literally takes up the whole half of this side of your abdomen. It's very large. And the liver filters about 1 liter of blood every minute, which is a lot of fluid. And during that process, it also is involved with detoxification of both prescription medications and also chemicals that we get exposed to in our day-to-day life. I'm going to be talking a lot about some of these chemicals that we get exposed to and how the liver is involved with that process. During the process of liver detoxification, it's an amazing process that's occurring without us ever thinking about it. The liver has the ability to take a toxin and take it through basically 3 different steps to get it to make it a safe and removable product out of our body. And the process occurs in 3 steps. One where the chemical is activated, then it gets conjugated or bound up, and then it gets eliminated out of the body through the digestive tract. And if any of those steps are not working properly, then our body does not detoxify and toxins end up getting stored in our body. So has anybody ever known anyone who's been constipated? Well, that means that the exhaust is not working in our body, and then toxins build up. So if that is not functioning, then the body can become toxic. Okay, also the lymphatic system. When in the United States medical system, one of the big specialties is called cardiology, and that's the study of the circulatory system. But the other system that is involved with moving fluid through the body is called the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system is basically the highway for getting toxins moved out of the body. The lymphatic system transports immune cells, and it also basically takes waste product from our cells and sort of transports it into the bloodstream so that it could go to the liver and kidneys and get out of the body. So has anybody ever known anyone who's had fluid retention in their feet or their hands? Or have you ever felt puffy, like after you've had a salty meal? That means the lymphatic system is not working as well as it should, and that means that the body is not detoxifying as well as it should. Okay? So, at the very most fundamental part of detoxification, the part that's the most important is our cells. Every cell in our body has the job of detoxifying itself. And every cell is sort of like a microcosm of our whole body. Every cell has a nucleus, where that's where all of the DNA and instructions on how the cell's supposed to work is located. And it also produces energy for itself in a organ that's called mitochondria. Has anybody heard of mitochondria before?
Yeah.
Believe it, not everybody knows.
What, the opposite?
Yes, of course. Now, if our cells are working well, then that's when we feel well. But if our cells are not working well, that's when symptoms start to occur. And that's why I've asked everyone to fill out one of these symptom surveys, because when you rate each one of those symptoms on a scale of 0 to 4, and you total them all up, it will help you to identify which body system is not functioning optimally. And I'm going to go over some case presentations at the end that will help you to understand what your score means compared to other people. Okay, so if you haven't filled it out yet, then do so as you have time during this talk, and then we'll go over it at the end. And I won't ask anybody to tell me your score, unless you want to share it. So the cells have a cell membrane, and the cell membrane is sort of like the outside of the walls of this building. And the membrane helps to get nutrition in and toxins out of the cell. When a cell is working properly, water, oxygen, and nutrients come into the cell, and toxins like lactic acid or other products of cellular metabolism are released out of the cell. And if the cell is not working properly, the cell cannot get oxygen or water or nutrients in, and it can't get toxins out. So that's why it's important to understand how the cell works. The cell membrane is made up of fats. And fat, there's good fats that help to make up the cell membrane, and they go by names like phosphatidylcholine, or saturated fat, or phosphatidylserine. Has anybody heard of those names before?
Yeah.
The bad fats that make the cell membrane not work well are called trans-saturated fats. Have you ever heard about margarine? Yep. So that's part of the reason why they tell you trans-saturated fats increase the risk for heart disease, because they make the cell membrane hard. The cell membrane is supposed to be pliable and soft, and that makes the cell work properly. When the cell is working at its optimal level, again, we're going to go back to the mitochondria concept, because that's really one of the most important parts of how our body needs to work properly. Mitochondria, when it's working properly, our body is energized, our body detoxifies itself properly, but when it's not, that's when everything starts misfunctioning. Mitochondria are found in high concentrations in certain organs that are very active. So it's very highly concentrated in the heart, which is a muscle, and other muscle tissue. Like somebody who is able to run really fast, their muscle cells have a lot of mitochondria, which are producing energy to allow the body to run fast. But people that feel like they're slow and sluggish have fewer mitochondria because their body is toxic. Fat cells have few mitochondria. Fat cells, the only purpose of fat cells in our body is to store calories. And that's basically a way for our body to have energy when we're not eating. Inside of the mitochondria, ideally, under optimal conditions, our cells take a glucose molecule out of the bloodstream into the cell, into the mitochondria, and during a process that's called aerobic metabolism, which means metabolism with oxygen, the glucose gets turned into 38 ATP molecules. Now, if a person is not getting oxygen into the cell, like for example, if you're running a sprint race and there's not enough time for oxygen to get into the cell, then the body produces energy with anaerobic metabolism. That means it makes energy without oxygen, and that means one glucose turns into just 2 ATP. So that's 19 times less efficient. And what's important about that is that if a person has toxic cells, then they also are not able to get oxygen into the cell properly, and their body is chronically running on low oxygen. And that's where people start developing symptoms like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, because their cells are not oxygenated. And that's also why until a person goes through a process of healing their cells, something like hyperbaric oxygen is a great technique to temporarily revitalize the cell's oxygen levels. Does that make sense to everybody? So if a person has mitochondrial dysfunction, which is talked a lot about in the autism community, basically what's happening is the person's body is running on an empty tank of gas. Imagine your car getting 38 miles per gallon if you have a great functioning engine, but versus 2 miles to the gallon if the engine is not working properly. So basically, if the mitochondria gets oxygen, it's working 19 times more efficient than if it has no oxygen. And if it has no oxygen, not only does it cause chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, but it also increases the risk for heart disease and diabetes and neurologic dysfunctions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Every cell in the body can get affected, and in that symptom survey, you can see what part of your body is not working at your optimal level. The second most important nutrient that the body needs is water. That's why everybody is told to drink 1 to 2 liters of water a day. Does anybody accomplish that?
It's high.
All right, so one person does.
It's high.
75% of the body weight is made up of water. Now, in our society today, we're eating a lot of foods that are processed. And what that means is that they have a lot of salt or sugar that's added for flavor or as a preservative, okay? Now, with all that extra sugar and salt added to food, what that does is it causes our cells to become dehydrated. The cells are not able to get as much fluid inside because it's dry, because basically all the sugar and salt is sort of capturing the water. And that's where a person would get fluid retention. If a person has fluid retention, water is outside of the cell. When a person does not have fluid retention, water is inside of the cell. So if a person, so that's why everybody's told to drink 1 to 2 liters of water per day. Think about does anybody have a pet at home, like a cat or a dog? Like, how much water do they drink in a day? Not much. So why can they survive on such little water, and yet we need to walk around with a water bottle in our hands and drink all the time? It's because they're not eating processed foods, and we are. And that's why they always say, don't feed your pet from the dinner table, because you don't want your pet to eat food. It's kind of ridiculous, right?
I
Anyway, when our cells, so the whole concept is understanding how the body is supposed to work so that we can regain balance. And when the body is in balance, then it works at its optimal level. Okay? And the process of staying in balance is your job. When you go to a healthcare provider, the optimal scenario is they are your guide to help you to regain balance. It's not for them to take care of you. It's for them to help you understand how to keep your body healthy.
If only our medical system understood that.
Well,
If only.
I think this is being taped, so we'll
Oh, you're not gonna talk about it. So I can't bring this to the FDA.
So, when a body is out of balance, that's when symptoms start to occur. So think about if you are think about right now, sitting in this chair, is there any part of your body that's not feeling at 100%? Maybe the elbow aches, or the shoulder or knee, or maybe fluid retention, or maybe cold, something like that. I'm cold too, by the way. That's where we come up with the concept of weakest link theory, which means that there's the part of the body that's out of balance is the weak link in your chain. And again, that's where this symptom survey is nice, because it helps you to more easily identify what part of your body is the weak link. Does anybody want to share what score you had yet?
I don't care, I'm anonymous. I got a 46.
So the goal is under 14.
Yep.
And I'm going to come back to that, because then I'm going to go through some case presentations. But which part of it did you score the highest on?
Immunity by far, that's half of it.
Now, the reason that most people that take the test will score high on immunity. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of questions that talk about inflammation. And that is frankly, that's a good sign, because that's the first step that the body takes in order to protect itself, is create inflammation. And so if a person just has inflammation as their major symptom, then that means that it's not too difficult to get their body back on track. But when it becomes one of the other signs or symptoms, that's when it's more difficult. That's when the cellular dysfunction is becoming more established. So we sort of categorize it into immune, neurologic, weight, digestion, endocrine, and cardiovascular systems. Now, here's where we're going to start talking about environmental medicine, and we're going to sort of hold on the side what we've just been discussing about how the body's supposed to work optimally. So in environmental has anybody heard of environmental medicine before? Okay. At this center, Dr. Tran practices environmental medicine. She was nice enough to come to New York and spend time in our office. Their environmental medicine is sort of the part of medicine that deals with how the environment affects our health. So we've heard about allergies and chemical sensitivities, or people that might get sick from getting exposure to too much mercury from eating tuna fish. Those are the types of people that typically seek out environmental medicine. But the reality is that just about any type of healthcare problem that is in medicine has some relationship to environmental causes. Okay? The three principles that I sort of want to highlight of environmental medicine is that our body, when it's not functioning properly, can start to accumulate toxins from the environment, and that adds to our body burden. Okay? When we get exposed to toxins, our body tries to adapt to it. Okay? And then everybody has biochemical individuality. No two people will respond to a toxin the same way. All right? When we talk about body burden, there's a number of factors that are involved with determining what our body burden is. There's physical factors, such as, whether it's hot out or cold out. Our body sort of will detoxify better when it's hot because we can sweat. There's chemical factors, like if we're getting exposed to mercury from fish or lead from paint. There's biologic factors, like some people that get chronic infections or have had exposure to like chicken pox as a child and then gets shingles as an adult. And then there's psychological factors. So believe it or not, depending on our emotional state, that affects our ability to detoxify ourselves. So, and this has a lot to do with something called post-traumatic stress. Has anybody heard of that before? So when people have stress from the past, we're more likely to, just like we're holding on to that memory of that event, we also are more likely to hold on to toxins, okay? And there's ways to help people release those bad memories, just like there's ways to get rid of bad toxins from the environment. With adaptation, thank goodness our body can adapt to the environment. When we walk outside on a sunny day in Southern California, the first thing we do is we cover our eyes because the sun's so bright. But after a while, our eyes adapt to the sun. If a person works out, like starting on a new exercise program, of course the muscles get tight and tired. But after doing the exercise program for a week or two, the muscles adapt and it becomes easier. And also, think about walking into your favorite coffee shop and you smell that amazing flavor of coffee. But then after a few minutes, the scent no longer is apparent. And the same thing happens with toxins. If we're in a moldy environment, initially we might smell, oh, this smells like mildew in here. But if we ignore it, the smell will disappear because our body is adapted to it. It doesn't mean that the mold went away. And if we don't pay attention to that, then we are susceptible to getting toxic because it adds to our body burden. Also, chlorinated water. Does anybody ever smelled water out of the faucet? Does it have a smell to it? Sometimes sulfur, or sometimes like chlorine. Well, if we don't, right. So if we don't pay attention to it, then we just drink it, and because it's there, and we adapt to it, it no longer tastes chlorinated, but that doesn't mean the chlorine's not there. We're getting exposed to it, and it's another opportunity for our body to add to its burden. Also, in healthcare, we see children with rashes that let's say, because they were told they have a milk allergy growing up. But that child grows out of that milk allergy and the rash disappears when they get into their teenage years. Does that mean that the allergy is no longer there? No, it doesn't. It actually means the body has adapted and it's no longer creating a rash, but instead of the rash, it becomes something more embedded in our body, such as leading to asthma, or chronic sinus symptoms, or chronic throat infections, or chronic ear infections. So that's why a detailed history from a person that understands environmental medicine, like Dr. Tran, is important, so it's easier to pick out what is in the environment that might be causing problems. And then for biochemical individuality, this explains why some people are more susceptible to getting sick than others. Like, how come when there's a flu epidemic, everyone is not sick? Some people get sick and some people don't. Is it just because of the flu vaccine? The reason you're laughing is also because people that get the flu vaccine actually many times get the flu. Right. So there's, I'm not going to get into the.
Yeah.
That's a
I'm buttoning my lip on that one.
Also, the nutritional state that a person is in when they get an exposure has a lot to do with how well they are able to handle the exposure. So a person that's eating a very clean diet will be better able to handle toxins than somebody that's having a processed food diet. And also, the nutritional state of the mother when the baby is being developed has a lot to do with setting the stage for how healthy that baby will be when it's born and grows up in its environment. So that's, again, why preconception counseling is becoming really important. And actually, Dr. Tran was just telling me about some of the techniques that she's using now to teach pregnant mothers about how to live healthfully in society. So anyway, we've talked a lot about toxins. What exactly is this concept of toxins? It's kind of nebulous because it could mean so many different things. From my perspective, toxins are chemicals, heavy metals, or processed foods that we get exposed to in the environment. It's basically anything that causes an adverse effect on our body. Now, anything could be toxic. Too much water can be toxic. Too much oxygen can be toxic, by the way. All right? So it has to do with the amount, of exposure and the time for toxicity. That's how this is related. And also, products of cellular metabolism can be toxic. That means that our cells, if our cells are not able to detoxify themselves properly, the toxins that they create as part of normal cellular metabolism can become toxic. And that's, again, another reason why if a person's not able to detoxify themselves, if their exhaust system is not working, then they're going to be more susceptible to adding to their body burden. So toxins cause disease because it makes our cells not get oxygen well, because the cell membrane becomes sick. It makes our cells not get enough water, because the cell membranes are not working properly. Our bodies can become acidic because cellular metabolism is not able to detoxify itself properly. And then our bodies become inflamed, and when inflammation occurs, then our body again is acidic and it cannot drain itself properly. And then it's just a repeating cascade. It just gets worse and worse if things are not done about it. So, doctor, everything in my local supermarket is highly processed, full of pesticides and other chemicals, that's totally lacking in nutrients. And the doctor says, as I say, just eat a little of everything in moderation, and variety are the key to health. So that's what we're being told when we go to the doctors today. Toxins are a global concern. An industrial plant that's producing whatever in this community is spewing toxic chemicals into the atmosphere that get spread all around the world. We've heard about quite a lot of environmental catastrophes recently. We've heard about the Gulf Coast oil spill, and they dispersed a ton of oil dispersants, hoping to sort of bind up all the oil molecules. And as it turns out, now they're finding out that those dispersants are making people more sick than the oil would have. And those dispersants get into the fish.
Yeah.
So when you're eating that Gulf Coast shrimp, you also are getting exposed to those toxic chemicals. And then, of course, we had the Fukushima disaster, radiation. So, isn't it interesting, has anybody heard that it's over?
No.
But remember when it first exploded, like it was front lines news and everybody in the United States was gonna get exposed? But it hasn't stopped? So, I would love it, I don't have one, but if somebody has a Geiger counter, I'd love to know whether there's been, if there's a
I
change.
have it. I check my food and everything. In Irvine, it's pretty normal.
Okay.
Where I live, it's normal.
All right, thank you.
It's even below the normal level of surroundings, which is supposed to be. So.
Wonderful. So anyway, toxins are found in food, water, and air, okay? And so knowing that, we sort of, it gives us an ability to be able to make better decisions when we're going to the food store or when we're picking, you know, deciding what type of laundry detergent to use or things like that. And also, you know, I give a lot of great examples in the book about like how to make better choices at the grocery store. One of the toxins that we're always talking about is heavy metals. And the reason heavy metals are such a big toxin problem is because it's ubiquitous in our environment. The big issue in this, you know, the Southern California has been mercury in tuna fish and other types of fish as well. But there's other heavy metals that we all get exposed to. Heavy metals get mined out of the earth, and during that mining process it gets spewed into the atmosphere, and then it comes down in the rain, and then it gets into the fish, and it gets into other areas as well. And it's just important to know where the least likely exposed areas are. The heavy metals that we're mostly concerned about are arsenic, cadmium, lead, mercury. So with arsenic, fortunately in this area, arsenic is not a big issue. But the signs of arsenic toxicity, just in case anybody wants to know, is hyperpigmented palms and soles. The sources are typically from seafood. Now, the good news is that like shellfish that has arsenic generally doesn't make us toxic. It's called, that is a organic form of arsenic, and somehow organic arsenic does not cause toxicity. It's inorganic arsenic that does. Now the interesting thing is, since 1940, arsenic has been used in chicken feed. And the FDA just recently made a decision to ask the manufacturer of this arsenic-containing chemical called 3-nitro or roxarsone to take out this arsenic-containing chemical out of chicken feed. It was added for two reasons. One, it's an antiparasitic. And two, it causes the chickens to get fat. So it helps increase the size of chicken. But what they found in this New York Times article in just June of this year, that the arsenic actually turns into the terrible form, which is the inorganic arsenic, and the chickens were found to have arsenic toxicity. And then if we're eating non-organic chicken, then we get exposed. Now, the reason that's important is because that's the type of thing that could cause people that are eating it to gain weight. So if the arsenic was causing the chickens to get fat, if we're eating arsenic-containing chicken, we also will possibly get fat. And remember, whenever you go to the doctor and they tell you to go on a weight loss program, you end up eating chicken. Yeah. One of the signs of arsenic toxicity is this symptom called Bowes lines, which is this white pigmentation across the nail bed. It's the whole way across, it's not those little white spots. And if a person has arsenic toxicity, basically the ideal is avoid exposure, but if a person is toxic with arsenic, that's where chelation therapy can be useful. And Dr. Tran can tell you all about it. Cadmium is a heavy metal that's pretty ubiquitous nowadays because it's found in nickel-cadmium batteries, it's in cigarette smoke, it's in painters use it with cadmium red or cadmium yellow. And we do see people with cadmium toxicity in our office. So the typical the places of exposure are the paints, the batteries or from cigarette smoking.
Why grains?
Because it's also used, cadmium trailings can be used as a fertilizer in non-organic agriculture. So, like in tobacco actually, they use this fertilizer with cadmium in it, and then the tobacco leaves concentrate cadmium in it. So that's how it Lead is another heavy metal that we've all heard about. It was a big problem before 1970s when it used to be in leaded gas. It used to be in leaded paint, also lead pencils. Now the interesting thing about lead is that it's, all of us that were exposed to lead in our environment before 1970, we end up storing it in bone. And the reason that's important is because women that are going through menopause and are losing bone density also release lead out of their body, and they start getting exposed to that lead again. So the reason this is important, and I'll get it to in another slide, is that JAMA, which is a medical journal, had some articles about 2 or 3 years ago that showed that postmenopausal women end up getting high blood pressure from lead that they were exposed to in the past. So has anybody heard about after they go through menopause they get high blood pressure? It's something that we see in medicine a lot.
Right, where's that water being this?
This was a article by the EPA that said that if you are using water to make baby formula, then don't use hot water, because hot water will leach lead out of the pipes and cold water will not. Now the interesting thing is they used leaded pipes were pretty common for a long time. It's been removed, but brass contains a significant amount of lead still, even if it says lead-free. So here it says even lead-free pipes can contain as much as 8% lead. And then for lead toxicity, the EPA generally says if the lead in a child or adult's blood is under 10, that's within the reference range and that's acceptable. Okay? This is just another source of exposure. Children's lunch boxes have lead toxicity. So here, in the New England Journal of Medicine, they said that intellectual impairment in children occurs with a blood lead even under 10. So there's really no safe level of exposure to lead. The typical symptoms of lead toxicity are difficulty with learning in children, ADD, ADHD, also memory changes. In adults, it can be high blood pressure and also neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and things like that. This was an article in Circulation, which is a medical journal, that said that adults with a blood lead above 2 increase the risk for all-cause mortality, including heart disease. Okay? So remember, in children, under 10 is acceptable, but according to Circulation in 2006, a level above 2 is not good. So you can just ask your doctor to do a blood lead and see what your level is. And if it's high, then the goal is to find out where the exposure is so that you can eliminate it. Now if the exposure is from yourself because you had lead in your bones, then you need to go work with somebody to help prevent you from turning over bone rapidly. So that's when we do like a bone building protocol. Yes?
So if you have too much lead in you and as a result you have ADD or ADHD and you reduce your level of lead, will that reduce the symptoms of ADD?
So if you are able to lower your exposure, that's the first step. And then the question is your body able to get rid of it on its own? We do have innately the ability to detoxify ourselves from heavy metals. There's a special protein that our body makes that's specifically for binding metals, metallothionein. It's like our internal chelating agent. But some people are too toxic and they can't get rid of it, and they just accumulate it. And that's where something like chelation therapy sometimes is necessary. So you gotta work with your doctor to see what the level of accumulation is versus the level of exposure. Blood test shows exposure, urine test with a binding agent shows accumulation. And then mercury is the other famous toxin. It's always in the press. Mercury comes from mercury fillings and mercury thermometers and fluorescent light bulbs. Right? So that's why, it's so funny because, it's not funny, but right now, in order to save energy, we've all been switching over from incandescent lights to fluorescent lights.
Yeah.
Now, those fluorescent light bulbs, they usually have a circle with an Hg on the side, which means mercury. If you happen to break that in your home or in the office, it is a hazardous material, and you need a special hazmat group to come and clean it up. Because if you vacuum it, you just disperse the mercury into the air, and then you breathe it up, and that's not good.
Job creation. Come on.
And if you don't break
Obviously
it,
being
if it's just
sarcastic.
on, does it still release some mercury?
Well, that is questionable. Are these fluorescent lights releasing mercury into the air? Supposedly, it's not releasing mercury gas into the air, but it's debatable whether there's some kind of mercury exposure.
Oh, so how do you measure it?
It's a great question. Usually the hazmat team has special devices that help with measuring mercury. Lead is really easy because you can just get lead
Right.
test strips. Mercury, I do not know of anything you can do at home to measure.
How many politicians does it take to change a light bulb?
Mercury is really a big deal in the water, and this picture just shows all the areas in the country that have mercury consumption advisory for fish. The white states actually do not have any mercury monitoring systems, so they're not registered. So basically every state has some type of mercury advisory for fish. And here's 30 signs of mercury toxicity. Anyway, the big symptoms are fatigue, difficulty concentrating, memory changes, irritability, ringing in the ears, metallic taste in the mouth, numbness and tingling, things like that. In 2006, Nature magazine wrote that 600,000 children are born each year at risk for nervous system damage due to mercury. And a New York dermatologist published a really good paper showing that mercury also causes unusual rashes on the skin, and that by changing lifestyle patterns, by avoiding fish that has mercury, the rash is able to go away. And actually he used chelation therapy as his treatment for these rashes, and it successfully helped to get rid of the rash. This was an article in Environmental Health Perspective in 2007 that showed that 25% of New York adults, 25% have elevated blood mercury levels, like above the acceptable range. This was at or above 5. So ideally avoid mercury, and if you accumulate it, then that's where sometimes you have to do chelation therapy. There's lots of other toxins. The other one that I sort of want to talk about that comes from outside of the home is mold, because it's so ubiquitous as a problem. Mold usually occurs in areas that have water damage. Now, mold can cause toxicity for 2 reasons. One is because a person might be allergic to mold, like itchy eyes, itchy ears, stuffy nose. But some molds actually create toxins. Has anybody heard of black mold or Stachybotrys? So Stachybotrys is a mold that can grow on water-damaged material like wall boards and floorboards, and they release a toxin into the environment that is a neurotoxin. It causes memory changes, difficulty concentrating. There's an easy way to check for black mold. You could go to Home Depot and pick up a mold test kit and then stick it in the area of your house that you think might be a problem. The usual areas are like bathrooms or near where you might do your laundry, refrigerator, behind refrigerators, or wherever you might smell mildew. And then you can send it back to the laboratory, and then they're looking to see if there's any mold growth. And they will identify which molds it is. It's not the most sensitive test. You can always get a company to come in and do more sensitive testing, but it's an easy, inexpensive first start. And then there's toxins that come from inside of our home, and most of the things that I'm going to be talking about are from foods. So these are all things that are easy for us to control just by making better choices about our lifestyle. When a person gets food toxicity, it occurs in a couple different ways. Number one, a person can be allergic to foods, and you can easily get blood tests to check for food allergy. There's two general types of food allergy tests. One is an IgE food allergy test, which measures the type of allergy that causes rashes or can cause anaphylactic reactions. Like if you eat a peanut and your throat swells up, that's an IgE allergy. Or there's delayed allergy, which is called IgG4. And that's the type that if you eat a food and you could get symptoms like up to 48 to 72 hours after the food is consumed. And that's a little bit more difficult to figure out just from timing of exposure. And that's where you can work with your doctor on doing one of these tests. There are specific foods in particular that cause a lot of problems, like gluten. Has anybody heard of gluten allergy? Yeah. Well, it's kind of, a lot of people have it, amazingly. So gluten in the United States has been, there's 5 grains that we say has gluten. Gluten is a protein found in grains: wheat, oats, barley, rye, and spelt. And in the United States, in order to enhance the shelf life of wheat on the shelf, the wheat product has been hybridized. It's been genetically hybridized to enhance the gluten content, which does 2 things. High amounts of gluten in bread and makes it more shelf stable. You can keep the bread on the shelf for a lot longer, and it makes the bread more fluffy, like those big fluffy bagels that you get in New York City have a lot of gluten. So, while on the one hand the industry has tried to make wheat more useful in today's society, it's created this huge health problem. And that's why nowadays there's so many people in the United States that have gluten sensitivity, where they may not have had any problems before had they been eating a low gluten grain. Now, because they've been exposed to this highly allergenic compound for so many years of their life, it's sparked an inflammatory process. And then once that spark has been triggered, they just have to avoid gluten altogether. There's a blood test to test for gluten allergy or sensitivity, and then in order to get diagnosed with the medical disease called celiac disease, which is the digestive focused symptoms from gluten sensitivity, that's a biopsy that's done with a colonoscopy. Anyway, if a person has gluten sensitivity, it's like the great imitator. It causes many symptoms other than just digestive symptoms. It can cause memory changes, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, irritability. It can cause ADD, hyperactivity. And then the corollary is dairy. Dairy in the United States is a processed food. Has anybody ever thought about it like that before? Yeah. Now, why is it processed? For 2 reasons. Really 1 reason. Well, 2 reasons. Originally, it was processed to help reduce the amount of bacteria that's in dairy. So it enhances the shelf life. And also the processing helps to make the milk look better when it's sitting on the shelf for a long time. So the processing occurs in 2 steps. One is pasteurization, and the other one is homogenization. Has anybody heard those 2 terms before? It's on every milk carton. Pasteurization is the heating of the milk to a high temperature to kill all the bacteria. But the bad part of that is that it also molecularly changes all the protein molecules in the milk. many people can be allergic to these new protein molecules. The homogenization process changes the fat globules from big fluffy fat globules into very small particles, so that on the shelf you don't see separation of the milk from the milk butter. So it makes it look pretty, but those small fat globules are not easy for our body to digest, and it just makes it more allergenic. So that's why there's this whole movement to eating and drinking raw dairy. That's the concept. But the problem is once you develop the allergy, you almost can't really get around it, because even the raw dairy is usually allergenic. Sugar is a processed food. Tastes great. But the problem is that the amount of sugar that we all consume today is so much more than it was 50 years ago. Before industrialization, people would eat maybe 5 pounds of sugar per person per year. Now that number is about 150. And not everyone in this room is eating their share. So some people out there are eating a lot more than that. So the problem is it's highly purified. Okay, another processed food, and when foods get processed, they become very pure, which makes it easy, which enhances the shelf life, but it also it affects our body. Our body doesn't know how to handle these processed foods. And the main symptoms that go along with sugar is that it's extremely addictive. Has anybody tried to stop eating sugar for a day? Like a day? It's very addicting. And frankly, medical journals show that sugar is more addicting than cocaine. And they did that in rat studies. They found that the rat would much more prefer to go and eat sugar than it would to... The other, yeah.
I have an example. Let's say I came from Europe here. I moved here. First month, everything was so sweet to me. They put sugar in bread here, in meat, and I could taste it. Now I cannot taste it anymore since I'm living here. But I remember when came, everything was incredibly yucky sweet.
So your body adapted.
Yeah.
So we know that people with high sugar, with eating too much sugar, it increases the risk for diabetes, high blood pressure, and then of course, like blood sugar fluctuations. That's why, there's the opposite end of the spectrum of high blood sugar is low blood sugar, hypoglycemia. And that's the people that if they go too long without eating, they start getting shaky or irritable. Feed them fast, otherwise they're not going to be very happy campers. Now, those are the big food allergies: gluten, dairy, sugar. There's other foods in our diet that can cause inflammation for some people, biochemical individuality. Nightshade vegetables are one of them. This right now is tomato season, but if you've got arthritis, tomatoes can cause worsening arthritis. The other nightshade vegetables: white potato, eggplant, pepper, and tobacco. So if you have arthritis, you might want to think about giving up those foods for a week or a month, and then reintroduce it. That's called elimination challenge test. Eliminate the food for a period of time, reintroduce it, and see how you feel. And if you feel the symptoms come on, don't ignore it, or your body will adapt. But if you listen to your body, then you'll be really good. Coffee. Don't hate me.
We can skip the slide.
But don't you love this when you can sleep when you're dead? And then nobody wants to get their cappuccino with the skull crossbones on it.
It's very acidic, right?
Right, that's the problem with coffee. The caffeine is not a problem, it's the acidity. So if a person is going through a detox and we want to keep our body alkaline, not acidic, then avoiding coffee for that period of time will be useful for you. Okay, soy is very controversial. There's a great book about this controversy called The Whole Soy Story. And it documents the whole history of where soy came from and how it was used in Asian culture as a condiment, not as a main food source. In the United States, soy is a major food product, and it's found in many different foods. It's highly genetically modified. Even non-GMO soy actually is GMO because they cannot separate the GMO from the non-GMO through pollination. You know, pollen blows with the wind and it will travel all over the world, just like toxins do, and it will settle on soy crops that are supposedly organic and non-GMO. So people can be allergic to soy, that's the issue. And the only way to know about it is to do a blood test or to do an elimination challenge test. And then the other foods that could be problems, that could cause inflammation for some people, include corn, beans. It's sort of a wild card with beans. Again, it's not a lot of people are allergic, but it's just something to think about. And then for nuts and seeds, generally those are pretty safe to eat, but if the goal is for weight loss, then they have a high fat content. And then food coloring. Did anybody hear about 1 or 2 months ago, the FDA has pulled some food colorings off the market because it's been shown to cause ADD? Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
So this is the second round of food colorings being pulled off the market. About 10 years ago, they were pulling off red food coloring. Remember those maraschino cherries that were red?
Red
They pulled-
M&Ms.
Red M&Ms.
Yes, and the red M&Ms because they cause cancer. So the tie-in here is now toxic diets can cause obesity. Okay, we already talked about chicken that have arsenic, and if you're eating foods that cause inflammation, that makes you sort of hold on to weight, and your body gets puffy. But also, there's a lot of other conditions that come along with being overweight, which arthritis, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease, stroke, cancer. And obesity is a national epidemic. 68% of Americans are considered overweight or obese. 68%, that's like 2/3 of the country. Back in 1991, it's not nearly as bad as it is today. If you look on the upper left-hand corner, you see that 1991, generally it was like 15 to 19% of people were considered obese. But today, it's basically the whole country is over 20%, and then down in these, where
30% is greater, oh, the red part, where.
the red part, which you didn't even see 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. So it's rapidly becoming a huge epidemic, and this is all information that comes from the CDC. So nowadays, weight loss programs are becoming big news. Everybody's talking about what's the latest weight loss program. Jessica mentioned that I used to work for Dr. Atkins, and now the Atkins diet was big, and there's a lot of different types of diets that have come from that. So there have been diets that focus on major macronutrients, like the Atkins diet is low carb, Pritikin's diet is low fat, and then some programs limit total calories, like Weight Watchers. And then there's also meal replacement programs like Jenny Craig or Slim Fast, which are giving you protein drinks to use as a way to help manage calories. And then most recently, detox diets have become popular because people are feeling great with it, and also celebrity endorsements. Like if you read the magazines, you're hearing about Gwyneth Paltrow or Beyonce following these programs. If a person does a detox diet, you want to do it in a healthy way. Just going on a juice fast is not necessarily a very healthful way to detoxify the body, because when you limit all nutrients like protein, fat, and carbs, then you actually are not able to produce the detoxification enzymes in the same capacity that you need to. Like maybe 3 to 5 days on a juice fast might be okay, but not for long term. And so that's sort of what gave me this stimulus to write my book about how a person can do a healthful detox plan. So why are people doing it? Because they want to lose weight and feel great. The symptoms of toxicity are all those symptoms that we talked about. fatigue, difficulty concentrating, memory changes, irritability, weight gain, low libido, muscle achiness, joint stiffness. So in the medical literature, there's been a lot of studies on weight loss programs for like limiting macronutrients or using protein shakes, but I did a literature review and I could not find any studies that showed what would happen to not only weight loss, but also symptoms when a person did a detox diet. So that's what I did in my office, is we started tracking patients and found that when they went on a detox diet, they had amazing results for weight loss and symptom scores, which is the symptom survey that you guys have already taken. So we did a 4-week trial. We had 31 people that consecutively came in for our program, and the age ranges from 23 to 77, and their pre-weight, before they started the program, their weights ranged from 137 pounds to 275 pounds. And this is just the characteristics. And what the program was is we used what we call a detox protein shake as a meal replacement for breakfast. They had a snack, which was usually fruit between breakfast and lunch, a shake and a salad for lunch, and then usually vegetables as a snack between lunch and dinner. And then at dinner, they had protein and vegetables. And there was no limit on the amount of vegetables they could eat, and then the protein was usually some type of lean protein like chicken that was organic, fish that had low mercury, and eggs or turkey.
So are those vegetables cooked or they're just?
And they could be cooked, steamed, or raw. The typical calorie content of one of these shakes was 253 calories, which is not low calorie, and there was 10 grams of fat, which mostly was from lecithin, which is phosphatidylcholine. That's the type of fat that helps your cell membranes to heal themselves. And then there was carbs in it, but the carbs was from a complex carb. And the protein was from rice protein, so it was non-allergenic. This is weird. The foods to include and avoid. Basically, we just told people to avoid all those foods that I talked to you about. It's sort of an elimination diet. So we suggested people avoid wheat, dairy, sugar, and then nightshade vegetables, and then corn, beans if weight loss was a goal, nuts and seeds if weight loss was a goal. And after 30 days on the program, people lost 9 pounds, which I think was good. And it was actually just as good as the best program that we could find in the medical literature, which was Atkins. And his program, usually people would lose about 9.5 to 10 pounds in a month. And people felt 66% better. That means that your symptom survey would be 65% low, 66% lower. So like go from 44 or whatever to like 20 something. That was great. Symptoms that improved were, itchy allergy symptoms got really like a lot better. People would say, I no longer need my allergy medication anymore. And digestive symptoms definitely improved, like amazingly well. Gas, bloating, constipation, loose bowel movements. And joints were better, energy was better. So I'm going to tell you about 2 patients that went through this program at our office. Jackie is a 28-year-old physical therapist, female physical therapist. She came to see us for her first visit in March of '09, and her symptoms were stomach pain, gas and bloating, and her symptoms were getting worse. She was diagnosed with reflux and gastritis when she went to her gastro and her GI doctor. She had a history of tonsils being removed, and also she had a stomach biopsy that did not show any cancer or any health problems. She was just taking birth control pills. She had no allergies. She did not smoke cigarettes, she rarely drank alcohol, she rarely drank coffee or tea, and her symptoms were fatigue, brain fog, and heavy menstrual cycles. On her symptom survey, she scored a 98
Wow.
to start with. and the goal is under 14. And her starting weight was 159, but she said her goal was 145. She was 5'9", her BMI was 23.5, and her current diet was yogurt or cereal or granola bar for breakfast, turkey sandwich for lunch, protein, vegetables, pasta or pizza for dinner, pretzels, goldfish, or ice cream as a snack. You know, typical American diet. It's not even terrible. Could be worse. Yeah. So why does she have these symptoms? Anyway, when she came in, we did a whole bunch of blood tests, and I said, while we're waiting to get the results back, why don't we try this detox diet and see how you do? So we put her on the shake for breakfast, seasonal fruit as a snack between breakfast and lunch, shake and a salad for lunch, seasonal vegetables, snack between lunch and dinner, and then protein and vegetables for dinner. And then I told her we'll see her back in 4 weeks to see how she does and go over her lab results. Her second visit was 4 weeks later, and she said, I have less abdominal gas and bloating, lighter menstrual cycles, and less acne. Her blood work was basically negative. I checked her for food allergies, gluten sensitivity, everything was negative. Her symptom survey went from 98 to 39 in 4 weeks, which is pretty good. And her weight went from 159 to 149. She lost 10 pounds in 4 weeks, which is good. And her, so she said, I'm feeling really good on this. I'd like to go another month and see how we do. Her third visit was a month later, 4 weeks later, so we're 8 weeks out. And now she says, I have much better energy, mild menstrual cycles, no abdominal pain, and she found that when she ate cucumbers, that's when she got her digestive symptoms. And that did not show up on any blood test. But when she introduced it, that's when she found, like, who would be allergic to cucumbers? But through this elimination diet, she figured it out. Her symptom survey after 8 weeks went from 98 to 20. The goal is under 14. We were pretty happy with that. And her final weight at 2 months went from 159 to 139. So what we decided to do is she said, I really like the program, and I said, well, you need to eat food. So she had kept up with the shake for breakfast. Lunch was protein and vegetables. Dinner was protein and vegetables and avoiding cucumbers, which she had problems with. And I still see her today, and she's still doing great. John is the other case study, and he came to see me for his first visit in October '08. Now, remember back in '08, this was when we had our first Great Recession, all right? And he's a 43-year-old male investment fund manager, and he worked for one of the funds that had a big problem. I live in New York City, we see a lot of Wall Street people, and he was in the crossfires of the recession. Anyway, he came to see me because he said he wanted help with weight loss, job stress, no other health concerns. He had no past medical history, no past surgeries, he was on no prescription medications, no allergies, did not smoke cigarettes. If he drank beer, it would be once or twice a week, and he would usually drink green tea. After going through a review of symptoms, his other symptoms were low libido, low sex drive, and he had seasonal allergies. On his, that is not him.
It says 255 pounds.
Like, it could be. So his symptom survey started at 27, which is not so bad. But his weight was 255 and his goal was 180. He's 6'1". His blood pressure when he first came to see me was 140/90, which is borderline. And his typical diet was bagels, peanut butter, and yogurt for breakfast, cold cuts for lunch, steak or sushi for dinner, candy and nuts as a snack. And in his first visit, what we decided to do was do the blood test to see what's going on and then start the detox diet and see how he does. And then he was going to come back to see me in 4 weeks. 4 weeks later, he comes back to review his results. I have more energy and no digestive symptoms. And his blood work showed his total cholesterol was 234. The goal is under 200. His triglycerides were 522. The goal is under 100. And his HDL, good cholesterol, was 31. The goal is above 60. And we checked something called high-sensitive C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation in the blood vessels. Under 1 is the goal. He was at 4.5. And his testosterone level was 177. Normal for a guy is 600 to 1,000. So his symptom survey after 4 weeks went from 27 to 11. So that's 60% improvement. His weight went from 255 to 234 in one month, so 20 pounds. His blood pressure came from 140/90 to 130/80. And we offered, his testosterone was so low, at other doctor's offices, you might say, well, go on testosterone, you're super low, you might benefit from it, but he was doing well, and he said, I think things are getting better, let's just keep on going, and we'll recheck and see what happens. So we did not give him testosterone. So we decided to continue the program exactly like it is and come back to see me in about another month. So he did, a month, 2 months out. A month later he came to see me. He said, I feel great, I started to exercise. His weight's now down to 214. His blood pressure is now normal, 120/70, from 140/90. And we said, okay, let's keep it up because you're almost at your goal weight, which was 180. And we wanted to see if his blood levels got better. So he came back to see me week 14. He said he's feeling great, his sex drive is better, he's exercising, his weight's down to 195, and his blood pressure is still 120/70. Now his total cholesterol is 171 from 234. His triglycerides went from 522 to 78. His HDL went from 31 to 54. His CRP, which is the marker for inflammation, went from 4.5 to 2. Under 1 is the goal. And his testosterone went from 177 to 395, which is now in the normal range. 300 to 1,000 is the goal. Above, between 600 and 1,000 is usually what we tell people we want to shoot for, but he said he was feeling great, so he didn't need it. And so basically we just kept him on a modified program, and he is still feeling great. So basically what we found is that when people follow this program, they were able to make better choices in their lifestyle, and these are things that they were able to continue to maintain to feel great, and they also lose weight. So by making good decisions, you can live a healthy lifestyle. And if you need help with how to do that, Dr. Tran is more than happy to help figure that out with you. And I'm going to be here for questions if anybody has any. Thank you for being a great audience. So the question is, if a person has if a child has a mitochondrial disorder, will they be more susceptible to being sick? Yes. Yes. Remember, with mitochondria, create energy for every cell in the body, including the immune system. So if the immune cells have no mitochondria, then absolutely they're not going to function as they should. Absolutely. Sure. So does anybody want to share your symptom surveys for us?
I'll toss it out there. I hit 15.
15? Very healthy. 6? Some healthy people. I'm speaking to the crowd. It's like speaking to the choir. 55. All right, well, that's great. But it's good to know where we start.
Okay, I do want to let everybody know that there was a special treat today. The books have been sponsored, so we would like to give you guys a book, one per household, and Dr. Morrison will can't give you a new card, we'll give you a free book. So he's going to sign them out here for you, so one per household, please.
Very
Okay, well, let's come on out.
Wow.